Strap into your seats and get ready. It's time for the Mortarpod.
Hey everybody, Alex Stephenson and Jake Faas here. Welcome to this week's episode of the Mortarpod. Jake, how's it going?
Good. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. I at least have not put up content for a couple weeks now. I was kind of expecting M15 to come online for pre-releases this week, but it turns out it's going to be next week. And next week would be July 25th is when the pre-release events are coming online. So I apologize for not having any more Vintage Masters drafts available for you guys. Other big news. Magic Online version 2.0 is down for good. How does that make you feel, Jay?
I guess I haven't really played on the new client, but I wasn't really excited to either. So I need to download it first before I can really criticize it. I like the old one. I like the very old one too, where you got to see your avatar and stuff like that. But I'm sure it'll be fine eventually.
Yeah, that's how I feel too. I think we just get used to things, and then, when you're paying money to do sort of, play like a game for like 3 or 4 hours in the case of drafts, you just want to make sure that you're not hindered because you don't understand how the interface works,
Yeah.
It's really frustrating when you're like, I don't know how I'm supposed to, make this trigger happen first, or anything confusing like that. Like, I think the only major issues I was having, and people commented and quickly explained to me how to fix it, but like my graveyard was like huge on the screen, and like I couldn't even see my opponents, and it was just like a scaling thing, If anything, I'm sure it's just they've added more stuff for you to be able to minimize or maximize, make bigger, make smaller.
Yeah, I do have to say that in the last version, sometimes it got a little cumbersome when you had all those windows, like to the right, and I don't know. It got to be a little too much in the way that they had it, I feel like. So I can criticize some of the stuff of the last one. Hopefully they fixed it in this newer version.
Well, I think in this new one it's full on like multi-tabs. Instead of like the tabs being all in one tab at the bottom, it like basically pulls you out into multiple. You have to like switch between multiple tabs on the bottom of Windows rather than in the program itself. At least that's the impression I got, or the understanding I have. But then once again, I'm still like a noob at the new interface. I've probably only done 2 or 3 drafts on it. Mm-hmm. So it's just going to be, a small window of trying to learn it. But I'm sure we'll get to it. Other than that, check out SeemsGoodMagic.com. I'm going to be posting some tutorial videos for my game, Travelers of Storia, hopefully over the next couple weeks as I get the first prototypes printed. I'm kind of excited about that, but it's going to be a little bit more time yet. But still working gradually, getting this schedule done, trying to get some really early prototypes of the game made so I can finally show people how the game works and stuff like that. If you have no information on the game, I recommend reading some of my blogs about it, which you can find at SeemsGoodMagic.com, and just basic information about it. It's a 1 to 4 player cooperative, fully cooperative RPG dungeon crawling style game. A lot of randomization, kind of a cool, dynamic, unique combat system that I think a lot of people who played like Final Fantasy Tactics and definitely Magic players will enjoy. So I'm looking forward to recording and posting some videos on that very shortly here, as well as M15 videos as soon as that comes online. I'll definitely be doing the pre-release. All right, let's jump into it this week.
Cyclical evolution.
All right, cyclical evolution. This is the segment of the show where Jake and I are going to be talking about some of the unusual cycles or cool cycles from sets from the past. And we are currently at Urza's block. Last week we did Urza's Saga. This week we're going to go through Urza's Legacy and Urza's Destiny. Some pretty cool cycles in here. Any quick comments about this block that you didn't mention last week? I guess anything in particular about Legacy and Destiny that you thought was kind of unique or cool?
Um, hmm. Well, I guess it's really cool how much they were trying to push enchantments in this block, and there are a lot of cards that specifically call out enchantments. However, they still were really overshadowed by a lot of the artifacts, which is really sad. Memory Jar I believe it was banned before it was released. And then also, out of the last set, they had, I'm drawing a blank. Oh, Masticore was in it too in the last set, as well as Powder Keg. So there just were really far superior artifacts, and Metalworker in the last set. And then Goblin Welder was in this block too. So even though they were really trying hard to focus on enchantments, they didn't cut back on the artifact goodness enough, And I think that ended up kind of overshadowing this whole block and really not making anybody realize that it was an enchantment theme.
Oh, that's kind of disappointing, but well, let's. I think we're starting it off with an enchantment cycle, so let's go ahead and take a look at that. All right, so we have a cycle from each color. Planar Collapse in white, Brink of Madness in black, Defense of the Heart in green, Second Chance in blue, and Impending Disaster in red. These are all enchantments. They all have a trigger during your upkeep, and if some sort of thing is met, in the case of Planar Collapse, if 4 or more creatures in play, Brink of Madness, if you have no cards in hand, Defense of the Heart, if one of your opponents controls 3 or more creatures, Second Chance, if you have 5 life or less, and Impending Disaster if there are 7 more lands in play. So all kind of vastly different things that it's looking for, requirements to be met. But then you sacrifice the enchantment and different things happen. So with Planar Collapse, 4 or more creatures in play, you get to sack it and destroy all creatures. Brink of Madness, no cards in hand, you get to sack it and your opponent discards their hand. Defense of the Heart, opponent controls 3 or more creatures, sacrifice it, you get to look for 2 creature cards and put them into play, which is pretty cool. Second Chance, if you have 5 or less life or less, you get to sack Second Chance and take an extra turn. And then if with Impending Disaster, if you have 7 or more if there are 7 or more lands in play total, you get to sack it and destroy all lands. So actually pretty powerful effects. All pretty cool.
Yeah, I think Impending Disaster is actually one of the better ones of this cycle. Mostly
for Commander, it seems ridiculous.
Yeah, well, even in Standard, I mean, in this time, Black and Red were kind of the not great Standard colors, but if there was a red aggro deck, this would be definitely something you could drop really early and then trigger it yourself,
Yeah, I totally agree. 2 mana destroying 7 lands at least is that is terribly, terribly efficient. Yeah, they're really, just nowadays, if you don't already know, they're just very careful with land destruction. I think land destruction was just one of those things that they left around, in the case of Stone Rain for a very long time. But then even that got to the point where it was like, we just don't like this card being played anymore. I don't want to play against decks that are land destruction. Seemed like everybody complained about it.
If you hiccup on turn 2 on your lands, then you're screwed if somebody's Stone Raining you on their turn 3, That's kind of what it comes down to.
Yeah, and I mean, I remember playing against Birds of Paradise Ramp too, where it was Birds, Stone Rain, and then they're starting on the 4-drops on turn 3, the 4-drop land destructions, and it's just it can be really annoying to play against. I do remember that.
Yeah, but overall, I think as far as power level goes, Defense of the Heart is probably just hands down the most powerful one.
Yeah, that's crazy.
Strictly. And when you pair a green with a different color, the fact that you don't have to search for green creature cards is really the part of it that's out of control. But you can also not so much at this time, but now there's cards like Forbidden Orchard and stuff like that where you can actually just hand your opponent a free creature. and it's like a nothing creature, you know, where these cards actually get a lot better. But
I see.
But
yeah, that's
Brink of
cool.
Madness is nothing. Like, that's actually a really bad card.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like this one, it should have been a drain effect, in my opinion. It should have been life drain. Maybe not even been Brink of Madness, but Second Chance almost should have been the one that triggered off of no cards in your hand, take an extra turn, or something like that.
I could see that. Yeah.
I don't really like Brink of Madness, and I think it's like the trigger is just too
narrow.
Yeah.
Yeah, and letting your opponent know that they just have to get rid of their hand is kind of, it's too slow.
Yeah, but if this had been something, if Brink had been something like, if the difference between your life total and your opponent's life total or whatever, if they have 5 more life than you, sack it during your upkeep, and they lose 5 life and you gain 5 life, something like that on Brink of Madness would have been actually pretty sweet.
Yeah. All right, let's move on. We got a lot to get through. Can't spend too much time on these. Okay, so the next one is an Aura Cycle, and we've got one from each color. And just to let you know, we are doing Urza's Legacy first, and then we'll be doing Urza's Destiny. So the Aura Cycle here, we've got Cessation in white, Rancor in green, Sleeper's Guile in black, Sluggishness in red, and Slow Motion in blue. Now, the sort of thing that ties all of these cards together is if they're put into a graveyard from play, from the battlefield, you get to return them to your hand, which is pretty cool. So Cessation, the white one, 3 mana, the creature can't attack. Rancor, 1 mana, the creature gets +2/+0 and trample. Sleeper's Guile just basically gives fear to a creature. Sluggishness makes a creature unable to block, and Slow Motion makes during the upkeep of the enchanted creature, they have to pay 2 or to sacrifice the creature. To me, Slow Motion is kind of the coolest one for interacting the best with its own ability.
Yeah, I'd say definitely that's true. I mean, obviously Rancor does too, because not gaining the pop or the toughness boost is fine when you know that you're just
going to get Rancor back.
Yeah, but Slow Motion, I'd say by far is the best, because no matter what part of it they do, you still are getting advantage off of it.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Like, Sluggishness is kind of the hard one to do, because it means that creature that can't block has to attack before you ever get it back, really. And then Sleeper's Guile seems fine, I guess, if they have some targeted removal and kill your feared creature and get it back. That's cool. Cessation, they still get to block, so I guess that one kind of makes sense. So this cycle actually seems pretty good. It seems like Rancor is the only one that survived the test of time in terms of being reprinted in, I believe it was in 13?
Yeah, I think so, in 13.
And it was highly played then, in an Infect deck especially.
Yeah.
But very cool cycle. Very cool common cycle, too. I bet these were all very nice limited cards to play.
Maybe Sluggishness being the exception.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, that's true. I guess if you're red aggro, just getting rid of a blocker
that's
not
true.
the worst.
And in Urza's Destiny, they had Wall of Glare, which could block any number of creatures, so slapping that on that would have been a great sideboard deck.
Oh, yeah, totally. Okay, moving on. We've got Defender of Chaos and Defender of Law. So we've got a red and a white Knight cycle. Defender of Chaos is a 3 mana 2/1 pro white, and you can play it anytime you could play an instant. And then Defender of Law, 3 mana 2/1 pro red, you can play it anytime you could play an instant. So I don't know if other people have noticed this sort of trend. They do seem to just make a lot of these sort of protection knights. It's kind of like just sort of a cycle they've kept throughout the continuity of Magic as they keep going. They just really like the idea of the knights that represent their color and have that, bitter rivalry with another color.
Yeah, I actually like this. I don't think it's overpowered. Either one of these are overpowered either, and I just kind of like Flash Knight as an idea.
I believe they've done it maybe a couple other times in white, but flash creatures in red, I believe, are pretty rare. We're talking about the Begarden Hellkite, which is like a mythic. There's a flash one. There's probably a couple others that I'm not thinking of, but
yeah, I think from that block there are still a couple more out of Time Spiral, but that was specific to Time Spiral block too. That a lot more things had flash.
Okay.
A lot of the other colors, got flash, but. Yeah, red typically hasn't had it as much as white, blue, and green get it.
I definitely see the value in playing an instant speed creature that's got a protection from a color.
Mm-hmm.
You can really, I could see some opportunities where you could really blow out an attack
Mm-hmm.
if they weren't prepared for, your protection creature.
Mm-hmm.
So cool cycle there. Okay, next we've got the birth of the colored manlands. So Fairy Conclave for blue, Forbidding Watchtower for white, Gitu Encampment for red, Treetop Village for green, and black gets Spawning Pool. So Fairy Conclave, 2 mana to activate, you get a 2, well they're all 2 mana activated abilities, and they can tap for whatever color of the creature that they can produce is. So Fairy Conclave gives you a 2/1 flying. I believe it's probably a fairy creature
just
now,
a
right?
flying fairy. Yep.
Okay, at this time it wasn't. It was just a blue creature with flying, but
Mm-hmm.
now they all actually have creature types. So I'll just go ahead and tell you sort of the oracle on those. Although I'm sure Jake's going to have to help me with
I
a
think
couple of them.
Watchtower is soldier, encampment is warrior, village is ape, and then spawning pool is skeleton.
Okay. So Forbidding Watchtower gives you a 1/5 creature, and it doesn't have defender, so it is a watchtower that can attack people, interestingly enough. Gitu Encampment gives you a 2/1 first striking creature. Treetop Village, my personal favorite, gives you a 3/3 trampling creature, and then Spawning Pool gives you a 1/1 creature that can regenerate for 1. Very, very cool cycle. This was brought back, I believe, was it M10?
10th edition, I
10th
thought.
edition, okay.
Yeah.
And just a great cycle of manlands. Always a welcome sight when they come back. Very cool. I think these were sort of the next generation of these that we'll eventually get to were in World Wake, which were the multicolor manlands. Sort of in the same vein as these cards. But did you have a personal favorite for these?
I guess my personal favorite is probably, I actually really like Forbidding Watchtower, mostly because it can block all of the other ones with no problem except for Conclave. And I know Conclave is good, and I've played Conclave plenty, but I remember in 10th edition playing both Fairy Conclave and Forbidding Watchtower in my blue-white deck, and Forbidding Watchtower pulled a lot of weight just as a 1/5. I only played one of them, but just being able to block a guy all the time, you're already playing wrath effects, so just having they have to commit more to the board, so you basically force them to play into your wraths.
Yeah, interestingly, Forbidding Watchtower is the only manland that doesn't have the extra ability attached to it, but it's got the 5 toughness, so it definitely seems justified. Okay, moving on. We've got Hope and Glory, Peace and Quiet, Rack and Ruin, Sick and Tired. Obviously, we can immediately see the relationship in the names. You've got 2 different, things going on. Whoa. That was weird. Oh, now it made your thing disappear.
Oh, what's gone?
There you go. All right. Okay. So we've got Hope and Glory, Peace and Quiet, Rack and Ruin, Sick and Tired. So Hope and Glory and Peace and Quiet are in white, Rack and Ruin in red, and Sick and Tired in black. They're all instant speed spells. They all target 2 things. Hope and Glory, you get to untap 2 creatures, and each of them get +1/+1. Very brutal combat trick, I'm sure. Peace and Quiet destroys 2 enchantments. Rack and Ruin in red destroys 2 artifacts. And Sick and Tired gives 2 creatures -1/-1. This seems like an excellent limited uncommon cycle. Usually just multi-target effects just are good in general.
Yeah. I bet Peace and Quiet was actually a lot better in this limited environment than Rack and Ruin was. But Rack and Ruin is a really amazing commander card, as are all multi-destruction spells. But Sick and Tired, I'm sure, was also a huge combat trick at common. That's
Sick
really...
and Tired and Hope and Glory both seem very excellent. Actually, I just realized now that you mentioned that Sick and Tired was the common of this cycle, which does kind of set it apart. Did they just feel that it wasn't good enough for uncommon? Is that what it was?
I'm sure what they wanted initially was it to be destroy 2 target creatures, but realized quickly enough that that was too powerful. So then when they did this, I think this could have been an uncommon if it was -2/-2 or -2/-1 even on 2 creatures.
Maybe they were
I
just
think
out of
that would have
space
worked.
or something.
Yeah, I think they wanted to play it a little more safe with this one in particular.
Okay.
But yeah, interestingly enough, they didn't even try with green or blue, and I really think that Hope and Glory could have been a green card easily. And blue, you could have just shoved in a double bounce spell, and it would have been fine.
Yeah, I can see that. It is, yeah, it's definitely odd that they created 2 white cards, but no blue or green. That is weird. Okay, moving on. We've got Iron Maiden, not the rock band, and Wheel of Torture. So these are both 3 mana artifact spells. Iron Maiden reads, during each of your opponent's upkeeps, Iron Maiden deals 1 damage to that player for each card, more than 4 in his or her hand. And Wheel of Torture is, during each of your opponent's upkeeps, Wheel of Torture deals 1 damage to that player for each card, fewer than 3 in his or her hand. So some immediate similarities to Black Vice and the Rack. And I believe you said these were supposedly fixes for those spells. Since they cost 3 mana, they're more on the top end. So that immediately makes them worse than both Black Vice and the Rack.
Yeah, and they put them up to rare too. So
yeah, very interesting that they thought that those cards were that powerful. I mean, even by today's standards, I think they could probably print Black Vice and it wouldn't be overpowered. I don't think it would.
I don't think so either. I think the other thing is it's about preparing people to deal with those cards too. You know, at this time, they just didn't do a lot of countermeasure in their sets. And in particular, this block where Mark Rosewater was pretty much design and development for it, like almost all by himself. It just, you know, you miss that stuff when you're looking at your own set. You don't really necessarily figure it all out. But anyway, yeah, by today's standards, Black Vice and the Rack are totally fine because they print so much removal for those effects. Now, white, red, and green can all consistently remove artifacts, you know, whereas at this time it was really a white and red thing only.
I see.
And like no other colors really could deal with them.
Unfortunately, these are just very weak.
Yeah.
Very weak cards. Cool pictures, though. All right, next, we've moved on to Urza's Destiny. So we've got Archery Training in white, Festering Wound in black, Incendiary in red, Private Research in blue, and Momentum in green. Now, what is the relationship between each of these? It looks like they all get unique counters, and then they give, they're all auras, and they build counters each upkeep, or each of your upkeeps, and then they all have sort of a unique ability. So the white one builds arrow counters, and then the creature that it's enchanting can deal X damage to an attacker or blocker equal to the number of arrow counters. Festering Wound deals X damage to a player during the upkeep of the enchanted creature controller, and X is the number of infection counters that are slowly building. That's kind of cool. Incendiary, you put fuse counters on it, and then when the enchanted creature dies, deals X damage to target creature or player, where it's the number of fuse counters on it. It's only 1 mana too. And then we've got Private Research in blue. You put page counters on it, and when the enchanted creature dies, you get to draw a card for each page counter on it. And when I say page, I believe it's...
It's not with an I.
Yeah, so it's referring to actual pages of like a book or a scroll, not of a not like a page assistant. And then we have Momentum in green. You get to put a counter, growth counter on it, and then the enchanted creature gets +1/+1 for each growth counter. So I immediately like this cycle just because, I don't know, I kind of like the constantly building effect. You know what it kind of reminds me of is the, do you remember the ring cycle from either M12 or M13? Where it's like the consistently building sort of effect. In that case, artifact form, in this case, enchantment form. But to be honest, all of these cards seem very good. I don't have an issue with any of these cards.
I think Momentum is the most underpowered because now they've printed 2 different cards that have like outdone this. The first one is Primal Cocoon, and the second one they just basically took and said put +1/+1 counters on your creature for 1 red and 1 green, and that's forced adaptation. I think from Guild Pack or Gatecrash. I'm sorry. Is that the one?
Say the name of it again. It sounds familiar.
Forced adaptation.
Does that build it +1/+1 each turn? Or is that if it's got counters on it or
Nope,
something?
that's the one. It's put a +1/+1 counter on it each of your upkeeps.
And it's 1 mana?
Yeah.
Wow. I wonder why
And it's con.
I wonder why I never played that card.
It was Simic or Gruul, but, you know, like, you probably had much better options if you were playing Simic anyway because you wanted to play more creatures, really.
Yeah, and there was just really good removal in that full block, too.
Anyway, important thing to note on these is the effect is like universal when they die, I guess, incendiary and private research. So these are better to put on your opponent's creatures because they give them no benefit and they don't want to kill them then before, you know what I mean?
I see
They're
what you're
not like
saying.
inclined to kill their own creatures necessarily.
No, yeah, that does make sense. So, yeah, so Incendiary, you can put it on your opponent's creatures. Private Research, put it on your opponent's creatures. Obviously, Festering Wound needs to go on your opponent's. Archery Training really needs to go on your own guys, as does Momentum.
Yeah.
But you get a bit more versatility with Private Research and Incendiary, which is kind of cool. Very good cycle all around. It seems like they had some issues with the pricing of them since Momentum was the most
Momentum
expensive.
is not right at all, you know, and I don't even think that they had bad removal at this time either. You know, like a lot of black removal was no regen on it. There was Radiance Judgment in this block where you would destroy a creature with 4 power or greater, you know. And then there was SWAT. So there was a lot of removal available, and I think they were just too afraid with Momentum, and that's sad because this card actually could have been a much better card.
Yeah, I agree. Festering Wound, though, very cool card. 2 mana. I guess that's still okay. But, you know, slowly building and doing more damage to your opponent for Black Deck. Very cool. Very good card. Put that on a wall, and they're probably in some really big trouble.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, moving on. We've got Aura Thief in blue, Body Snatcher in black, False Prophet in white, Pattern of Rebirth in green, Goblin Marshal in red, and Junk Diver in which is an artifact creature. So we've got a few different card types here. In the case of Pattern of Rebirth being an aura, maybe you want to say what the relationship is between all of these cards?
These are all. It's just a rare cycle of dies triggers, basically. Aura Thief, when it dies, you gain control of all enchantments.
Okay.
Body Snatcher, when it dies, you get a creature back from your graveyard. False Prophet, when it dies, you exile creatures. Pattern of Rebirth, when the enchanted creature dies, the creature's controller gets to search his or her library for a creature and put it onto the battlefield.
Cool.
Goblin Marshal, when it dies, well, Goblin Marshal is the weird one because it both triggers on enter and leaves, and dies. And that is to put 2 1/1 red goblin creature tokens out. And then Junk Diver, when it dies, you get to get a different artifact from your graveyard to your hand.
Okay. Cool relationship between all of these cards. Do you have any personal preferences on which one you like?
I think I like Pattern of Rebirth the most because of what it can do if you have a creature that just sacrifices itself to do something.
Yeah, like slap it on a Yavimaya Elder or something.
Yeah, or, I mean, at this time in Standard, you would have been able to do Mog Fanatic, you know. So, like, play Pattern on my Mog Fanatic, ping you, and then sack it, go get a guy, ping you.
Yeah, that's cool.
And
I like that.
The other notable thing on Pattern is that it's not restricted to what the enchanted creature's color was or anything like that. But the downside of Pattern is if your opponent steals the enchanted creature from you or has that opportunity, and then they
get the creature.
Yeah, they get the creature out of their library. But that's true of all of these. If your opponent gains control of them and they die, then they get the effect off of it. So it's not really anything.
I like the implications of Aura Thief and False Prophet for Commander games, where you can really just gank all of the enchantments or remove all the creatures.
I have Aura Thief and Enchanted Evening in my Rubinia deck, so I just have to have Greater Good out and then
steal everything.
Yeah. It's pretty much game over once you gain control of everything on the board.
Yeah. This looks like a cool cycle. All right, not too much to say. Let's move on. Next, we have a Seer cycle. So we've got one for each color. Brine Seer in blue, Cinder Seer in red, Jasmine Seer for white, Nightshade Seer for black, and Ivy Seer for green. So this is a cycle of cards that all have a 2 and their respective color active and tap activated ability. The Brine Seer, the blue one, lets you counter a spell unless they pay 1 for each blue card you reveal. Cinder Seer gets to deal X damage to a creature or player, where X is the number of cards, red cards you reveal. Jasmine Seer lets you gain 2 life for each white card you reveal. Nightshade Seer gives a creature neg X, where X is the number of cards, black cards revealed. And then Ivy Seer boosts creatures for each green card you reveal. So immediately I look at Cinder Seer and I'm like, wow, that's a great effect.
Yeah, I think that Cinder Seer, like, it's sad that Cinder Seer is so good because it kind of steps on the toes of Nightshade Seer. And even Ivy Seer to an extent, you know. Both of these do like half of what Cinder Seer can do.
It seems like Cinder Seer should have just targeted players.
Yeah,
that would have it would have set it apart from Nightshade enough, and it wouldn't have made it seem so powerful on the top end.
Yeah, I agree. I think that Cinder Seer should have just targeted players too. Ivy Seer then would also have a little more, you know. It can actually matter in combat a little more. But yeah, Cinder Seer is just like hands down the best. I feel like Brine Seer is actually one of the worst because of the commitment to mana that it requires all on its own. And then you have to basically let them know what you've got. But recurring counterspell is fine. You know, if you've just got a mitt full of counterspells anyway, if it's late enough in the game, it can be just brutal to have that counterspell out there that's never going to go away.
Yeah, this seems like a cycle that could get very dangerous and limited.
I think Jasmine Seer is actually really good too. But yeah, this is a great limited cycle.
Very powerful. Very much rewarding people for being monocolored. But very cool. Very powerful effect. All right. All kind of a cool like portrait style, because we have this Donato Giancola. Very Italian sounding, but I kind of like the portrait job he did. You kind of get this nice profile.
It's like what is it, a mural on all of them? The Cinder Seer has a mosaic, which is awesome. It's like an erupting volcano behind him. But everyone else is pretty much a mural, except I really do like the Nightshade one. Looks like stained glass.
Yeah, very cool. They're just all very different people. They come from all different walks of life. I mean, you have different sexes and ethnicities and stuff. So and species in the case of Ivy Seer. Yeah. So very cool. I like that. Very flavorful. And they're all wizards too. We should add. Okay. Next we have Eradicate in black, Quash in blue, Scour in white, Splinter in green, and Sowing Salt in red. So this is kind of an unusual cycle, but they all have an effect. And then you get to, it did it again. I wonder why it keeps doing that. It's weird. Current slide. Okay. So, so then you get to search. They have an effect. In the case of Eradicate, you get to exile a non-black creature. Quash, you get to counter an instant or sorcery. Scour, you get to exile an enchantment. Splinter, you get to exile a artifact, and Sowing Salt, you get to exile a non-basic land. And then you get to search the controller's library, graveyard, hand, and library for all copies of that card, and then exile those as well. So we had talked a little bit earlier before we started the podcast that this ability has sort of been limited to black and blue now, and mostly black. So it's very unusual to see this in green, white, and red.
Yeah. I mean, they've only done this again in as these cards. They've only reprinted these cards for white, red, and green, you know. So they've never really given them that effect again, I don't think. I mean, white sort of has effects like that where you get to name a card and they just can't play it. You know what I mean? So that's like kind of the way that white gets to do it. But
now, yeah.
But yeah, I mean, Lobotomy was the beginning of this style of effect, and that was in blue and black. So I think they figured those were, because they're like the mind colors in general, they just have to keep that there.
Yeah, this is a cool, pretty cool cycle. Splinter is actually very underwhelming just because it's so expensive. Green just now is able to take out artifacts for 1 mana, but I understand you're getting rid of all of them. So if your opponent is playing some sort of deck where, like you had mentioned, maybe Metalworker is kind of the focus of it, maybe you manage to resolve Splinter if you're on the play before they get their Metalworker out or something. I don't even think that's possible. Maybe if you're ramping in green or something.
It's kind of funny that they decided to do Scour as an instant, but Splinter as a sorcery, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Because I don't think Splinter is overpowered at instant,
Yeah, that is weird.
So it just, I don't know.
Yeah.
And Scour has always been the most underwhelming because, I don't know, Rancor is like the only enchantment that you really want to get rid of permanently, But
I guess for me, Eradicate definitely just seems like the most impressive, at least for constructed. Quash seems very good. I like that, especially if you're in a limited game where your opponent managed to get some really nice removal spells in multiples.
Yeah.
If you think about it, you quash the first big removal spell, quash the Eradicate, get rid of all those. It's kind of cool.
Sowing Salt is good for constructed versus manlands. And Eradicate actually probably should have had exile target non-artifact creature instead of exile target non-black.
And why is that?
Because it's able to do what Splinter can do versus artifact creatures, but
Oh, I see what you're saying. So it almost like steps on the toes of Splinter because
they should have made you choose between I need Splinter or I need to Eradicate to take out this or that.
That makes sense. Okay. Next, we've got the Scent cycle. So we have Scent of Brine in blue, Scent of Cinder in red, Scent of Ivy in green, Scent of Nightshade in black, and Scent of Jasmine in white. These should all seem very similar to you since we just looked at the Seers that all had the same sort of adjective describing them. And I think you're going to see some very close similarities. In fact, these cards almost could have been lumped in with those Seers since they literally have the exact same effect.
Yeah, it is exactly the same.
Just in instant and sorcery form as opposed to creature form. But Scent of Brine lets you counter spells equal to the number of blue cards you reveal for 2 mana. Scent of Cinder, 2 mana. Sorcery lets you reveal red cards and deal X damage to creature or player. Scent of Ivy, same thing, reveal green cards. Creature gets +X/+X. Scent of Nightshade, give a creature neg-X, number of black cards. And then Scent of Jasmine for 1 mana. You get to reveal white cards and gain 2 life for each card revealed this way. So we've got 2 of them, the green and white ones costing 1, and then the red, blue, and black ones costing 2. Don't really have to say too much about these cards. The only difference really being, whereas the creatures you get to keep, redoing the ability. In the case of these, you only get the one-time use out of them. But these are very cool to reveal off the Seer, and then maybe get some more value later from them.
I wonder if, I definitely think that Scent of Brine needed to be 2 mana because having Force Spike available to you that's better than Force Spike is probably too good.
I see.
But Scent of Nightshade, I'm wondering if because with these you have to take the card out of your hand to get the effect in the first place. It's like they're
a little more difficult to use.
Yeah, and so Scent of Cinder and Scent of Nightshade, I just wonder if they couldn't have been 1 mana as well. But it's also funny that Scent of Cinder is a sorcery and it's the only sorcery in the cycle.
Yeah, that is weird.
Considering that all of the Seers you could use at instant speed once you got them out anyway. So
I think they must have just been worried about 2 mana instant speed, 4 damage to any target for some reason or something like that. But I do see what you're saying. That is kind of weird that it sets it apart that much. Okay, moving on. We've got Voice of Duty and Voice of Reason. So these are 4 mana 2/2 flyers, both in white. Voice of Duty has pro green. Voice of Reason has pro blue. So continuing the trend of white getting excellent protections from other colors. These are pretty powerful cards.
Yeah, I kind of felt like these were out of place in general because, it's cool that they had them, but I feel like this was a stretch,
Yeah. And flying protection from a color in limited is so much more powerful.
Yeah, actually, Voice of Duty is really, really ridiculous the more I think about it. That just like shuts green down, like in a lot
what
of
are they
ways.
going to do about it? They can't even fight with it. They really have to be multicolored to deal with it, which is just tough. They can't even kill it. I mean, green is like notorious for having anti-flyer spells, but in this case, they can't do anything about it.
Yeah, and Voice of Reason is actually pretty bad or good against blue too, just because they have to counter it. That's the only way to get around it.
And blue is like one of those colors that's notorious for having excellent flyers, so being able to block it with protection is just insane too. So this is a very, very powerful uncommon cycle.
I mean, and Voice of Grace, Voice of Law were also really, really good too. So, I mean, this kind of goes without saying. These are each 10-turn clocks, and if you would have gotten 2 of them, you would have been golden, you know?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Yeah, just the whole circle of protection nonsense now with these voices, duty and reason and all that. Just the protection stuff just got out of control for a while there in white, and this seems like a time period where that was particularly evident.
Yeah, and they really they loved protection, and with good reason. It's a great ability, but they have now since realized that protection needs to be used a little more sparingly, and not with extra abilities tacked on, and.
All right, moving on. We've got Covetous Dragon, Emperor Crocodile, and Tethered Griffin. So this is kind of a cool cycle. Covetous Dragon is in red, a 5-mana 6/5 flying dragon, but if you control no artifacts, you have to sacrifice Covetous Dragon. Emperor Crocodile is a 4-mana 5/5, but if you control no other creatures, you have to sacrifice it. And then Tethered Griffin is a 1-mana 2/3 flyer, but if you control no enchantments, you have to sacrifice it. So a rare cycle. All undercosted, overpowered creatures on the top end with the stipulation that have to have something else or we have to sacrifice them. So, very cool cycle. I like the idea behind it.
Yeah, I wish Crocodile would have had trample or something, some sort of evasion, Yeah. Since Tethered Griffin and Dragon both got it.
Yeah, Emperor Crocodile would have been significantly more powerful. If it had trample. 4-mana 5/5 trample is very good.
I think they could easily print this at uncommon or common now.
Yeah, definitely. Cool. Very cool cycle, though. Covetous Dragon really is the one to me that feels the most rare.
Right.
That one definitely feels like a very rare effect. Like, even now, I think they would be very uncomfortable printing a 5-mana 6/5 flyer at uncommon.
Yeah.
But like you said with the other two, I think Emperor Crocodile and Tethered Griffin could be uncommon. Pretty much problem-free. Tethered Griffin, yes, a 1-mana 2/3 flyer is good, but you have to keep in mind that you're never going to be able to play him on turn 1, so his cost is kind of irrelevant in this case.
In a much more aggressive block, like in Zendikar Worldwake or whatever, Tethered Griffin would have fit in as a common even.
Oh, that would have been great with Journey to Nowhere. What an excellent backup with that. That would have been great. Not too much else to say about him. Cool cycle, definitely. All right. Weird Harvest. So this is the segment of the show where we talk about a weird card from the past, specifically the name, picture of the card. In this case, we're going to be doing one from either Urza's Legacy or Urza's Destiny. But basically, we just kind of talk about it, encourage people to, if they're not watching the video podcast, to go at least look up the card and take a look at it, because there are some really funny cards from the past, and this week is no exception. So we've got Goblin Medics from Urza's Legacy. Is a 3-mana 1/1 goblin. Jake, do you actually want to look up quick if he's got any other creature types? Is it like a goblin something? No.
It would be awesome if he's Goblin Ferric. Let me just double check.
But very funny picture on this card, definitely.
Let's see here. Nope, he's Goblin Shaman.
Okay, that's funny. So it's called Goblin Medics. I guess it's a pretty innocuous name. It doesn't really all that have all that much effect on you. But the picture is hilarious. So we've got 2 goblins hauling a Vyashno warrior. It's annoying. Oops. Hauling a Vyashno warrior, and they're wearing like sirens that are blaring on their head, and they just look thoroughly confused and like agitated by the pain that the Viashino is clearly in. They've got like a horrible splint going on the Viashino's leg. It almost looks like it's digging into his foot. He just looks so silly. He's wearing these crazy armbands. He has his left arm like unnaturally put up in the air, like it's being stabilized in that position. He's totally wrapped in bandages in like unnecessary places, like on his tail next to that spot, and it's just very funny. Let me quickly go over what the card does. So it's a 3-mana 1/1, and when it becomes tapped, it deals 1 damage to a creature or player, which isn't actually that bad of an ability. It's reminiscent of the Gatecrash card with Battalion, is it? Or
yeah, Fire Fist Striker.
Not that one. The Shock something. The guy that like
Battalion. Shock Troopers?
Yeah, I feel like that's not his name either. But you attack with 2 other creatures and it deals 1 damage to a creature or player. But it's 1 mana cheaper to play, and it's a 1 mana or 2 mana 1/2 as opposed to a 3 mana 1/1. But this one is very similar to that, but it doesn't require you to have Battalion to deal the 1 damage to a creature or player. So I actually kind of like this card. This seems like a card that if you had it in multiples, you could kill creatures before they get a chance to block, which is very powerful as well. But the reason I really like the picture and design of this card is you hear Goblin Medic and you're like, oh, so maybe they're going to fix my other creatures, but they deal damage, and that's kind of the humor in it, is that they're so inept at as being a medic that when they attack, they're like, when they become tapped, they're dealing more damage rather than actually fixing it. And the flavor text on the card is first do some harm, which opposed to the human doctors, which would be do no harm.
Yeah.
So very funny card. I urge people to check out Goblin Medics. I think you'll thoroughly enjoy the art on this one. All right, that's going to wrap up this week. I'm definitely going to be having M15 drafts posted by the end of the week. Thanks for stopping out, everybody. What do we got next week for them, Jake, for the next podcast? We're officially done with Urza's block now.
Yeah, we'll be doing Masks block, which is, I think, the only block that's ever taken place across 3 different planes. So the first set is set in Mercadia, the second set is set in Wrath, and then the third set is set on Dominaria. And that'll lead us up into Invasion, too. So
okay. Cool. All right. A lot in store for you next week, so stay tuned, and we'll see you guys then.